This is the Last Temptation of John podcast. I'm your host, John Salem, and I want to welcome you to the show. Now, this podcast features me reading to you from my 3 latest books. We're starting with Book 1, The Pawns of Prophecy. If you're a new listener, I'd like to point out that this is an audiobook, so I'd encourage you to go back and start listening from Chapter 1. In today's show, I'll be reading Chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 is titled The Shepherd and His Flock, and Chapter 4 is titled Flotsam and Jetsam. And again, before we get started today, I'd like to point out that you can find all our podcast episodes on our website, and that web address is www.temptationofjohn.com. In addition to the podcast library, you'll find the full text version of every chapter of all 3 books, along with loads of additional behind-the-scenes content only available online. So if you're enjoying the story that I'm reading to you, the website will further enhance your experience, and you can sign up for my free book club too. Now, let's return to our story. Now listen, like I said before, you're just going to have to take my word, on it as to how I know things like this. Let's just say I have visions. Oh, you can call them revelations if you like, but to be honest with you, I'm a bit tired of that term. Don't worry, I'll explain more in a bit, but for now, it'd just be easier for both of us if you would simply let it be and trust me that I am telling you the truth. So anyway, I watched as Joseph Aloy Ratzinger was nearing the end of a rare public appearance. Does that name ring a bell for you? You see, although old Joe had officially retired back in 2013, I knew he had actually tried to get out of the rat race long before then. In fact, even before he had stepped down from the quote-unquote big chair, Joe often told me that all he really desired was to rest, maybe write a bit, and perhaps enjoy his old age. The fact is, Joe never wanted to rise to the top of his profession in the first place. In fact, prior to attaining that rank, he'd actually gone so far as to submit his formal resignation on 3 separate occasions. A lot of people don't know that. Yet each time his prior boss had talked him out of it. For my part, I told Joe countless times to just quit and be done with it all. But he didn't listen to me, and in the end, Joe had remained obedient to his superior's wishes, and eventually, Joe became the big boss himself. Even still, it's common knowledge that Joe's allegiance to his company has done nothing to help his health concerns. His past and present conditions read like a laundry list of serious medical dilemmas. Listen to this. Hemorrhagic stroke, 1991. Serious fall and head trauma, 1992. Hey, I can relate to that one. Another stroke in 2004, chronic heart palpitations and a case of serious bronchitis in 2006, a broken ankle in 2009, and when you're 81 years old, that's a big deal. He was living now with a pacemaker, chronic high blood pressure, and the list went on and on. Poor Joe. All these aches and pains, they finally led to his formal resignation in 2013. At least that's what most people thought. And while it's not newsworthy when most people retire, for my friend it was a big deal. Because if you don't know who he was yet, let me clue you in. Joseph Ratzinger is perhaps better known to you as Pope Benedict XVI, now Pope Emeritus of the Catholic Church. As for his, quote, retirement, did you know that Joe was the first pope to step down since the year 1415? Now, for you math wizards out there, that basically means that no pope has voluntarily retired for over 600 years. They're pretty much expected to die in office. And as for that previous abdicator, it was Pope Gregory XII. I'm sure you don't remember him, but trust me when I tell you that when Pope Gregory XII stepped down, it was a really big deal back then. Oh, the scandal. Believe me, I know, because I was there to see it all. But my friend Joe, he was cut from a different cloth. He had no intention of letting the wolf pack, otherwise known as the College of Cardinals, salivate around his deathbed while they conspired around him on who would be the next pope. Instead, he came up with a new exit strategy. Install a puppet for his figurehead and wield power behind the scenes. After all, he'd seen the Vice President Dick Cheney do this effectively during the G.W. Bush administration of U.S. politics, and I'm sure Joe figured he was at least as smart as that gun-toting American VP. Enter Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the charismatic Jesuit from South America. The ideal solution for Joseph. You see, Jorge took the name Pope Francis, and Joe happily passed the baton to him. Now Francis became the doll of the news, and everybody loved him while Joe sailed off to the sunset. The perfect cover for a man in power. Which brings us to today, with Joe having to endure an interview from the press. Now, knowing he had only a short time left in this world, I knew how much Joe despised wasting any of it on personal interviews like the one he was presently enduring. That's what the new guy Francis was supposed to be for, right? Yet somehow Joe had apparently agreed to do this appearance, and thus here he was trying to maintain a happy face. "Do you have any final words for the people of America, Your Eminency?" the interviewer asked. "Many of us in the U.S. fear Dr. Maybu's desire to install a one-world currency. Do you favor this or oppose it?" Realizing that this was the final question from his prep list, I saw Joe rise up and exhibit that charisma that has undoubtedly been the reason why he was elevated to his present position in the first place. "My children, if we let Christ fully enter our lives, are we not afraid that he might take something away from us too?" And after a pause, Joe answered his own question. "No, don't you see, if we let Christ in, we lose absolutely nothing of what makes life free, beautiful, and great. Instead, only in this friendship with him do we have experience in liberation. And when we give ourselves to him, we receive 100-fold back in return. Yes, I say open wide the doors to Christ, and you will find true life. We are all one people, one body in our Lord Jesus Christ. And if this is true, why not have one currency, nay, even one world government? My children, there is nothing to fear, and only peace and freedom for all to gain." Less than an hour later, I watched the Pope as he was finally back in his private rooms. Now, by the way, I'm still going to call Joe the Pope, because, as I've already mentioned, Joe continues to pull the strings in the Vatican, and, the figurehead that is Pope Francis is barely in this story, so we're going to go with Joe. So anyway, gone were Joe's formal papal garments, his red satin mozzetta, his wide-brimmed Saturno hat, and yes, even those neo-traditional red papal shoes that everyone thinks he fancies. Oh, those colorful shoes. I remember how he had worked hard to bring them back to popularity, with the help of Prada and a sizable quote-unquote donation to Joe's personal rainy day fund. But anyway, each time Joe wore those shoes now, I knew that he bitterly despised them, for he always complained that they were so uncomfortable, and I kept telling him to try them on before he endorsed them, but he didn't listen to me. Nonetheless, now that he was alone again, the Pope was dressed in a luxurious silk robe, whilst plush slippers caressed his overworked feet. Letting the cares of the outside world melt away, I watched Joe traipse over to his wet bar and pour himself a tall glass of a German honey-flavored liqueur called Bärenjäger. Personally, I'm not a fan of German liqueurs. I like the hard stuff. Jack, Wild Turkey, a good grain alcohol. Any of those will do the trick with me. But, Joe, he was a bit of a connoisseur. In terms of this present liqueur, he previously explained to me that most Bärenjägers, they were exported from Germany with about 60 to 90 proof of alcohol. However, given his position, Joseph now had access to a private label reserve from the manufacturer Tuck & Koning, and as such, his version, called Baron Fang, was actually a greater than 95 proof product, much to his delight. As he took a big sip of his drink, Joe smiled as he looked at the label on his bottle. It depicted a cartoon of a bear drinking the liqueur, a picture far different from that shown on most of the commercial bottles of Bärenjäger, which usually showed a fur trapper catching the bear. "Give me neither poverty nor riches, but only my daily bread." And Joe finished the smooth spirit and poured himself another. "Ah, and a little of this stuff too, nay?" he said. Strolling over to the corner of his living room, he sat down at his Fazioli grand piano. and immediately no less than 3 of his feline friends scampered to join him. Yuck, I absolutely hate cats. But Joseph had had a long affinity for them, and as such the Vatican had become quite infested with them since he rose to power. Pope Francis tried to quell the tide, but so far he'd been unsuccessful, and Benedict's cats still ruled. Amadeus, come here. Adolf, you rascal. Ah, Dieter, my love. Joe happily nuzzled all 3. Dieter was always his favorite. Now don't ask me why, they all looked the same to me. And then Joe said, "Okay, boys, let me play for you, please." And after taking another sip of his Baronfang, I watched as my friend proceeded to lose himself in music, while his cats curled up against him and purred contentedly. Yet suddenly one of the cats hissed, causing the other 2 to bound off in fright. "What is it, Dieter?" Joseph stopped playing and looked down at his friend, seeing the cat's entire body bowed up. "I believe that's Mozart's Piano Concerto number 21, said an unexpected voice that even I didn't recognize. "His music is by no means just entertainment," Joseph replied without turning around. "It contains the whole tragedy of human existence." For a brief moment I saw the Pope's body tense at the intrusion, and he even whispered, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And yet outwardly, the Pope refused to let his surprise show. Instead, he took another long sip of his drink, placed Dieter on the floor so his friend could scamper away to safety, and then smiled as he finally turned around to face his visitor. "Ah, I see there are 2 of you this time," the Pope commented dryly, observing his guest. Both men were dressed in black robes, although I knew that neither was a member of the clergy or on staff at the Vatican. Their ebon garments clashed terribly with the stark whiteness of their skin, their fair hair, and their light eyes. Stoic and stiff, they might well have been twins for all that they looked so much alike, and yet, like me, Joseph knew that they were not. "Hello, Your Grace," one of the men stepped forward. The Pope did not reply. Instead, he followed protocol, rose up to stand before the intruders, and then proceeded to offer his hand in a formal greeting. Each of the men took the Pope's hand and shook it, being sure to allow their middle finger to entwine with his during the shake in order to verify their identity. "The viper coils," one of the men said. "And its strike is deadly," added the second. "To the uninitiated," the first man finished the greeting. "Brudas," Joseph smiled slyly. "Welcome, I was expecting you." My vision of the Pope and his, quote, friends continued as an hour quickly passed while the conspirators conversed. German was the language spoken at this meeting, native to all 3, but I had no trouble following along. "The date, Your Grace?" asked one of the men. "Ah, that's the beauty of it," Joseph smiled. "I assume you know about the meeting at Mount Moriah?" "You mean Har Habayit, the Temple Mount?" the other brother questioned. "I'm surprised you would know the Hebrew word," Joseph snickered, and before either of the men could reply, he continued, "December 21st, that is the date, and the mosque at Al-Aqsa, yes, there on the mount is the site." Okay, guys, please understand, I had no idea what they were plotting, so this was all news to me. I mean, sure, I get revelations, but, to be honest, they're not all that revealing, if you ask me. I mean, it's not something I have any control over. Whatever the big man upstairs chooses to send me, that's what I get. Also, I'm not omnipotent or anything. I mean, heck, I don't even have a control over when these visions appear. And when I'm watching, although I can see the people pretty good and hear what they're saying, I can't read their minds or anything, so I don't really know what they're thinking. So I had no idea what my friend Joe was up to. "You are certain?" the second assassin slithered. "There can be no mistake. If Mabou is really the one, then he must be there." "Fool," Joseph replied. "You need not worry about my intelligence findings. Morolo has assured me that Mabou will be there, and yes, Mabou is the key figure. After all, it is his blood that will complete the, grand ritual." Was I watching a plot to assassinate one of the most beloved leaders in the world? And with the old pontiff at the head? I mean, yes, this is intriguing in a passing sort of way, and had I been much younger, I might actually have still cared about the implications of what they were discussing. However, as it was, whether Joe and his buddies killed 1 man or 100, that was their business. I mean, who is Maybu to me? He can't give me what I really want. It seems nobody can. So what do I care what happens to him? The whole world loves Maybu, the first assassin mocked. Why, he might as well be the second coming for all the praise he is getting. They will grow to dread him soon enough, Joseph replied. Remember, though the wicked spring up like grass, they will be forever destroyed in the end. When our plans are completed, Dr. Maybu will be reviled for the villain he truly is. But are the Jews on board with all this? The first man laughed, his loose tongue perhaps showing some of the effects of the Baron Fang. That's the beauty of Marolo's foreign planning, Joseph explained, taking the other's glass away from him and setting it down. Yet, thinking twice, he picked the drink up and downed it himself. That's my boy, Joe. That's too good to waste, Joe smiled before getting serious again. Chief Rabbi Metzger believes he is really the one responsible for setting up the December 21st event. It's all part of his, quote, interfaith dialogue mission, unquote. But what he's really erected an altar on the Temple Mount to mark the new holiday that will be created. Can you believe it? And you will be there too, Your Excellency? The first man was salivating in his excitement. Why, naturally, said Joe, for Metzger has asked Maybu and I to join him in consecrating the grand altar to the one true God that we all serve. After all, you don't think I would miss the day of delivery, do you? Glory be, said one of the intruders. I can't wait to see Maybu delivered upon the altar. Well, evil comes to him who searches for it. The Pope let the thought hang ominously, even as all 3 conspirators nodded to one another and smiled. Just then my vision ended. Interesting? Yes, but like I said, had I cared, I probably would have made arrangements to visit with Joe and get the scoop. As it was, I was just thankful that when the vision ended, I could finally get some sleep. Okay, let me stop for a minute here because I can see that you're having a bit of a problem. So go ahead, let's get it on the table. Ask me your questions. 1. Who am I? Well, I already told you. I'm John Salem. So how do I get these revelations? Again, I just told you the answer to that too. I don't have any control over my visions. I get whatever he sends me. And apparently he still thinks I care. But I mean, have you read the book of Revelation? I mean, would you like to keep getting visions like that over and over and over again for 2,000 years? I don't think so. So how do my revelations work? Look, I'm not really sure, except to say that I have received them both during the day while awake, kind of like a daydream, and at night while sleeping. I mean, I get them all the time. Nonetheless, while hours or days could pass during a vision, when I return to my reality, it's as if only the blink of an eye has passed. Who is he that gives me my revelations? I was waiting for you to ask that. Would you think I'm crazy if I said that he is Jesus of Nazareth? Oh, so you do think I'm just a crazy old man, huh? Well, that's fine. I mean, it means we finally agree on something. So what's my mission? Actually, it's called the commission. But from my perspective, I don't have a mission anymore because I'm long past caring. Well, what was the commission? You're not ready for the answer for that yet. Why am I telling you all this? Well, let's just say I'm doing a good deed as part of my penance. Now, why he couldn't have just let me say 1,000 Hail Marys and Our Fathers, I don't know. But this is what he came up with. He said it would be kind of a, quote, good use of my talents again, end quote. I guess you will have to be the judge of that. So where am I at right now? You're definitely not ready for that. Okay, enough with these questions. Gee whiz, I mean, we're going to be here all night if we don't keep moving on. Now, where was I anyway? Oh, yeah. The end of our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Now be sure to visit our website at temptationofjohn.com, where you can read the full text version of this chapter. On our website, you'll find links to every podcast episode, and you can also join the Temptation of John book club. It's free to join, and you can get notified when new chapters are released. Again, you'll find all this and more at temptationofjohn.com.